Well, welcome everybody. I'm Ryan Evans with the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Just want to thank you for joining today's webinar. And as always, want to remind you that you can find an updated schedule of future webinars, as well as an archive of past recordings on our center's website. That's cap.unl.edu, cap.unl.edu. And today we'll be revisiting the topics of transition and succession on the farm and ranch, this time from the perspective of producers. We're about to hear from Allan Vyhnalek, a Nebraska Extension educator for transition and succession. And last summer, Allan and I visited two area operations here in Nebraska, and we'll hear first from David Endorf, who is a retiring farmer near Dakin, Nebraska. David will share his experiences transitioning to a landlord now as he hands the operation off to from his farm to a new tenant. And we'll also hear from Ryan and June Losky, as well as their daughter and son-in-law, Liz and Braden Forker, who have a cattle operation near Columbus. And they'll talk about their experiences transitioning their operation across multiple generations of their family. So we want to thank all of the participants for filming these with us, and we hope that you find them informative and helpful. And what we're about to see are some pre-recorded segments that Allan Vyhnalek has made, but he is here on the webinar with us, so please feel free to type in any questions or comments you have in the chat box or the Q&A panel as we go. Allan, of course, is a great resource for all things transition, succession, and estate planning when it comes to farmers and ranchers. So please do utilize that resource this hour, and Allan will address any questions we have at the end of the presentation. So with that, we'll turn it over and we'll start this. So thanks for joining us today.
Hi, this is Allan Vyhnalek with the University of Nebraska, and I'm glad to be with you again today as we talk about this farm succession stuff on this particular seminar. And I'm going to share my screen and get to the slides and get going on this. Here's how you get a hold of me if you need to talk to me. I have a phone number there. Leave a message if I'm not in the office. There's a website there. You can see a lot of my videos at that website. And there's my email. I'm happy to get back to you via email if that works out for you. So today we're talking about farm businesses and how they transition to wherever they're going to go. So we can transition two ways, right? We transition with the idea that the business is going to end, or we transition with the idea that we're going to succeed to the next operator, whatever that looks like. So instead of hearing me talking about those two paths to the future of our business, we're going to actually talk to Nebraska families. This is a program. These are interviews we did last summer, and one family ended their farm business. We'll hear from them first, and then we'll switch over to the other family and let them talk about how they succeeded and some of the considerations they were making as they put that all together. So the first part of this program will be for the operator that is ending his business. His name is David Endorf. He's from Dakin. His children were not coming back to the operation. His decision was to retire. He rented a farm to a couple of neighbors, brothers, and we interviewed him about a month before his online auction, which was in the summer of 22. And let's hear his story about how this works, especially on his first segment. Hear about how he can recite the history of his operation and what the pride he has in that. And I think we have to recognize and acknowledge that exists for all Nebraskans as they think about their operation and how successful they were. And they're prideful in that, and that's appropriate.
I'm David Endorf. I'm here at Dakin, Nebraska in my farm shop and visiting with Allan Vyhnalek here from University of Nebraska Extension here. And we're talking about farm succession today. A little bit of history with my farm. I moved here to my farm here at Dakin when I was in kindergarten. Back in 1959. And at that time, this farm looked a whole lot different. My father had bought a half section of ground here, and obviously about a third of it is pasture, and about 2/3 of it was row crop. And obviously at that time, it was all dry land. And looking around my farmstead, you can still see some of the old buildings. As typical of that time, you had a few milk cows, you had chickens, you sold cream, you sold eggs. That was your spending money. Also milk and eggs for the table. And a lot of the grain and hay that were produced went to feed that livestock. We had hogs at that time. There's still a farrowing house down here, the old 8x8 pens. Dad farrowed sows in there once, twice a year. He had pigs, sold hogs, always worked to sort and load hogs. Wasn't fun. But then in 1964, my dad was able to buy a neighboring quarter, and in 1967 was our first irrigation well showed up on the farm. And that really changed life on the farm. All of a sudden we went from having to even buy a little grain to having extra grain to sell. And over the course of years then, Dad bought a little more ground on the way. Most of it was dry land that we developed for irrigation. We dug a well here at home back in probably the early 80s, because we originally tried to flood irrigate about 28, 30 acres off of runoff from the other well, and that didn't work. So so in the 90s then I stepped that up, put a pivot on this farm, and so life has changed with pivots and with irrigation. So today my operation is 12 irrigation wells and about 1,500 acres of ground.
So we asked Dave also that's his background. It's a good background to have about how big his operation is, that sort of thing. We also asked David to talk about how he got his land from his parents and what was his main objective as he went through that process. I think this is kind of an important thing to consider.
My mother actually died fairly young. She was 54 years old, died in late 1984. They were in the process of building the home that I live in right now here on this farmstead. And so as part of settling my mother's estate, they had done some estate planning. And so each of us 3 children, I have an older sister, Lynn, who is a registered nurse, was a registered nurse. She's now retired in Lincoln. My younger sister, Mary, is a year younger than me, and she married a farmer, lives east of town here. And so each of us inherited an 80 acres of land. I inherited half the home quarter, and each of the other 2 inherited a separate 80. And my father then rented. We rented fairly reasonably to him, probably cheaply, enough to pay the taxes, and he continued to farm. Then when he passed away in 2005, and so then I was the administrator of that estate, and I had a distant cousin working for me at that time, and he made a very interesting comment. He says, if you can settle that estate and sit down with your sisters and brothers-in-law for a good Christmas and Thanksgiving dinner, he says, you will have accomplished something. And I did. And a big part of settling my father's estate was the fact that my brother-in-law had realized, and he knew, and he worked close enough around here where he knew that I had put a lot of sweat equity into this operation. And we did the best we could to make things equal, fair. The girls got cash, obviously. I got a little bit from life insurance proceeds, but every bit of cash that I got ended up going into finishing this home. So, with the machinery, after he turned 65, he realized that he needed to retire so he didn't have to pay back all his Social Security. And so he set out on a plan to where he helped my sisters at that time build homes by giving them cash. For example, one year at Christmas time, each of them got a $10,000 check, and I got a bill of sale for a $10,000 corn head. And so, as some of the equipment needed to be traded off, I wrote him checks for the trade-in value of a tractor and bought a new tractor, or a different tractor. And so by the time that he was 75 years old, 3 or 4 years before he retired, he pretty much had no interest in the equipment anymore at all. I had purchased it all, but it was a slow process. My mother actually died.
So that's interesting because they used quite a few years to start that transition and get that going, that succession plan for them. And so I think that that's a kind of a key point to make with people doing this work. You have to leave yourself several years to get this all done, especially if you're transferring or succeeding to the next generation. So think about that carefully. Here, Dave wants to talk about why he's not farming any longer. And so we'll let him do that. It's an interesting conversation that he had with us.
What's causing me to end my career at this time? First of all, is I'm 69 years old. And I'm looking at next year, I start receiving Social Security. I haven't started yet. Want to get that maximum Social Security. But the more money I make, if I'm still actively farming, I have to pay more tax on my Social Security, and I'm still paying a lot of income tax. I'm proud to say I'm paying a lot of income tax. And a lot of people don't know it, but if you're a high income person, on Medicare, they hammer you too. They send me a nice letter each year that says, since your income was high last year, then you have to pay extra and over and above for your Medicare. And so I'm in that class too. My wife wants to travel more. We've already got a bus trip lined up for August here, late August. Probably looking at going to Alaska maybe next year. Things that we want to do.
So David made the decision then with the factors he talked about, plus the fact that his kids weren't coming back and some other things that he talked about he was going to end his farming career. And he also talks to us about the thoughts he had on having a tenant take over his operation.
So then it became my focus of how or what or where can I look at a successor farmer. And obviously the easy thing to do would be to put an ad in the paper, and I'm sure I'd have dozens of phone calls of people wanting to rent my ground and how much will it take, how much is the highest bid, and how much can I raise it. And I really didn't want to do that because I've seen that happen in my community already before. What happens? The fences disappear, the waterways disappear, the terraces get leveled off. A little history story here is this farm where I'm sitting, where this half section that my father started out with, was the county conservation farm in 1946. And most of those terraces are still here today. They've been maintained, plowed up, taken care of. Some of the waterways have been converted to tile outlets, but I wanted to see that continued, And a lot of my farming operation is some smaller fields. There's a couple places you couldn't physically get a 24-row planter into. Got to cross the creek, go over the river and through the woods. And so that's why I wanted to work with a smaller farmer. I wanted to work with a younger farmer, simply because my goal was to set someone up in my farming operation to continue my farm. That would still be the Endorf farm. And I let my renters know that it was going to be a long-term rental situation.
So that's interesting because he talked about a couple things that I think about a lot. In other words, what is our overall goal? What do we really want to have happen? Are we trying to maximize rent? Or are we trying to maximize how or think about how our farm is going to be treated as we go forward? And I think that's an important consideration when you're picking a tenant. Let's talk about the transitioning process, and we'll talk about how Dave will talk about how that went for him.
Positive things, good things for leasing to them. First of all, is the younger brother Chris worked for me for about a year and 3 months. Started in the fall harvest of 20, and worked for me the whole year in 21, including the harvest in the fall of 21. And you know, I saw a young man and his brother both. They had a lot of ambition. They had a lot of good family background, well educated. Both had gone to college. Just a lot of common sense, good work ethic. That's a good way to put it. That's what I saw in them.
So it doesn't all go perfectly, and so here's some unexpected outcomes that David had as he went through this transition process, and we'll let him tell it from his point of view.
What didn't go well, okay? I had what I call written down, what is my plan for retirement? And my plan was first of all, is to just work with one of the brothers. Okay, that was kind of my plan, my goal, and my preference. But they wanted to do it together, and we had a couple really good heart-to-heart talks about. Quite frankly, in our neighborhood, there have been some brothers that didn't get along. I'll go back to my father. When he first came here and started farming, he worked with his brother that lived 7 miles away. And especially came harvest time. Well, we're going to harvest yours first. We're going to plant yours first. You know, we're going to do yours first. What? There was a little friction there. Did they get along? Yes, fine. But you know, we had a case here a few miles away to the east here, where two brothers literally got into a fist fight, beat each other up pretty good over who's going to do what and who isn't. And I really had a heart-to-heart talk with these brothers, and I said, you know, this will all work out well until one of the four of you, including your wives, until one of the four of you feels like you're getting the short end of the stick. Whether that's time, whether it's money, whether it's family expenses, whatever. But I said, as long as you can get along, fine, but don't put me in the middle. The other thing that I kind of had a goal that I had in my mind was that this would remain a farming operation. I mean, it's 1,500 acres of land and irrigation, about 1,200 acres of actual cropland, 1,250 to be exact, irrigation. And it's been my life's work. And I figured that would be a full-time job for one person. And I had hoped that you know, that one person, that one of those brothers would then purchase at least a major share of my equipment. But they had other ideas, and that's all right. It took me a while to kind of accept that, but I have to learn to be a landlord too.
And so it turns out that the equipment that they had grown up with was a different color than David's equipment, and you can kind of see where that went. I think the important part about that video is that families have to understand that it's going to be family first, and hopefully those brothers have that figured out. And also the comment he made about the spouses is really, really critical, because if the spouses are on board, this isn't going to happen. So make sure the spouses are on board with whatever's going on as you go forward, however that looks for your operation, what you've got happening. Let's talk about communication for a minute. That's a critical point, and it's one that I make all the time in my talks.
There probably hasn't been as much contact as I would have liked. And part of that is my own problem. I guess, you know, I've been busy getting this stuff ready, and my tenants know that. But I'll give you just a little example. I had two big brush piles, and Chris had helped me build them last fall. And this spring, we didn't have very many opportunities to burn them. They're right on the corner of their farm ground. In fact, it would have been in the way of their big equipment. And so I called Chris. I said, can you come and help me burn these two piles this morning? Well, I got to work on my planner. Okay, well, you know, as my place as a landlord, I can't demand that they come and do this. I can't. So I went and did it myself, and it all worked out. I didn't have any problems. But, my irrigation equipment, some of it's kind of complicated. I have one place where I run 4 different pivots off of, and run a flood line off of one well. And you got to have things correctly hooked up and put together right. And, I asked them, I said, when it comes time to work on this, I'd really like to be involved. And I haven't been a whole lot. But have they had any disasters? No, but you get the point. You see what I'm trying to say. The communication could have been better. So that's just a minor thing. But being a landlord, I don't need to be calling them up every day. Are you coming today to plant my crop? Are you coming to spray? Are you coming to irrigate today? No, I don't need to be doing that. And that's been a little bit difficult, but we just have to work those details out.
So that's an interesting commentary he had there on the communication he would prefer. And I think that all tenants need to listen to that very carefully, because the tenants need to understand that landlords still want to know, even if it's a cash rent. Now, in this case, David and his tenants have a crop share going on. But anyway, let's learn about that right now when David talks about how he put together his written lease.
And let's talk about the lease agreement. And first of all, I have to compliment the UNL Ag Economics Department. I basically used their leases that they have published as a template, and that really formed the basis for my leases. One of the things that they did ask for, and I respected, is they wanted a right of first refusal clause, which you did not have in the UNL leases, and they asked for that, and I put it in there. So that was important to them, and I saw no reason why it shouldn't be included.
And so since it's a crop share lease, to talk about how you're going to market your share of the crop, and let's see how that went for David and his tenants.
We visited briefly earlier about the grain marketing part. We had to talk about on a share lease of who's going to market the grain, how we're going to market the grain. I have a lot of grain bins here. I'm just a firm believer in storage of grain. First of all, is you can harvest that grain just a little bit wetter, put it in the bins, air dry it a little bit, and then we have some really good markets here that need corn year round. Probably 8 out of the last 10 years, I have hauled them corn during Christmas week when nobody else wants to. I ask for a little extra money for that, see? But if you can, by storing your grain, it's typical that we can add 10 to 15 to 20% onto that price of corn every year.
So that's an interesting comment about grain marketing. I thought it was worth putting in there. That's why I did it. And so here's David's advice to other landlords as they go forward in their operation.
We can talk. A good question has to do with what advice I would give to other landowners that are considering retirement. First of all, is the process probably hasn't been near as hard as I anticipated that it would be. Yes, it has its challenges. Yes, there's it's a little work working out a lease, picking the right person, so forth. But yet I looked at it as what are my real goals here? I want to involve a young person or a young family or two in my community. I just love to go to the church where they worship and see them there. I love to see them on our local street, shopping in our local store. Those kind of things. To me, that's one of them plays softball on the men's softball team. Those are just little things, you know, and they've talked about maybe joining the fire department at some point, especially when they move closer. Those are important little pieces of helping to build and keep and maintain our small rural communities. And that's what I wanted to be part of.
I really enjoy that because it's the values that I would have if I was succeeding too, or transitioning my farm to someone else. So it's just something to keep in mind. If that's what you want, that'd be great. And some other thoughts on what farmers should consider if they're ending their farming career. What to look out for?
Things to look out for in the process. Obviously, you have to consult your tax person. I'm looking at having a online auction for my equipment, and you know, yes, there's going to be some tax consequences. I have been deferring a lot of my grain income till the next year as part of my tax strategy for years, and because of that, I'll have a lot of income this year and not a lot of expenses. Yes, I'm going to get hammered on some income tax, but it's just part of life. I've been paying a lot of income tax over the years, and I'll just pay some more. Yes, you know, I am doing some charitable giving also, setting up some things to give away for charity, support some causes that I'm passionate about,
and so it's a couple things there. You know, if you want to support the future of rural Nebraska, maybe that charitable giving part is something you really have to consider very carefully, because how else is rural going to stay strong if we don't, as our older generation don't choose to support it? And so I really applaud David for having that thought. And especially, you know, like in my situation, my children are both really successful professionally. Do they need everything that my wife and I have? No. So given to a charitable cause is just fine. Thanks to David Endorf for letting us come to his place a month before his sale to share his story, and he covered both the good and the bad with that talk, and I appreciate that very much. And the point is, I would like to say that we're going to be on right here in a minute with the other story. We're going to end this one right here, right now, and we'll get back to you in just a moment with the other story that's going on. So just a minute, we'll get this thing stopped. Okay, here we go. This is the second half of the program, and I want to get that going for us. And so that should be right here. That should get us going. There we go. So as we discussed before, the question becomes, if we're all farms and ranches transition, will your business end? That's what we heard about from David. Now, how will your business succeed to the next operator if you have that option, if you're lucky enough to have that next family coming back? So the second part of this thing features a family, Ryan and June Losky and their family, and they are succeeding to the next generation. So we're going to hear from them. And so here we go. Let's hear from them. The mom and dad are Ryan and June. Their daughter and her husband are back. That's Liz and her husband, Braden, last name Forker. And they have a new baby, Callie, I think I caught the name as. And they have brothers coming back to the operation too. And so let's hear from Ryan and June without any more messing around from me. Here you go.
I'm June Losky. We live in Columbus, Nebraska. We farm and feed cattle north of Columbus, and we are both veterinarians, and we have 4 children, one of which is back in the operation with her husband and helping us with the veterinary practice.
My name is Ryan Losky. I'm married to June. I get to work alongside June every day, enjoy that opportunity. Our oldest daughter, Liz, is back with her husband. They have started a cow herd, and Liz helps us in the veterinary clinic as well. We have a daughter getting married this summer. She's getting her master's degree, and we have 2 sons who will be at UNL this fall.
So they got started with the help of Ryan's father, Wayne. And let's hear about that.
I think as we transitioned over to the next generation, we had an opportunity, June and I were engaged, I guess, to purchase this feed yard from a neighbor. Must have been back in 1993. It was a smaller operation, and Dad was supportive of that decision for us to do it. It was, feeding cattle. It seems like a lifelong commitment, but we did see it as an opportunity. So yeah, Dad was supportive of that. I think, initially, as we all know, farming is equity intense, and Dad often says, I think we're cash poor but equity rich. So the perception from non-agriculturalists is we are wealthy people, and maybe on paper we are, but making that transition takes some help from the previous generation.
So a week before we got married, Ryan called me up and said that we had an opportunity to buy this 80 acres, and there was 4 pens on it. 2 were ready to go, and actually the guy was feeding cattle in them. And since then, we just have expanded it. When we got out of veterinary school, we started filling it with cattle 2 years later, and we were able to purchase a few acres south of the feed yard that connected to it and put 8 more pens on about 5 years ago. So little by little, it's become from 4 to 20 pens.
So they also go on to talk about how they got some land and how it was acquired and how they went about doing that. And I think that's how this has normally happened. And so we need to hear that story.
There's been some land transferred, done it through gifting, for tax purposes, where husband and wife gift husband and wife. So we're thankful for that. Obviously, land has appreciated greatly since the 90s.
We were able to buy 2 quarter sections that were fairly close when we were early back here, so we could actually have our commodity shed just right across the road from the feed yard on ground that we hadn't purchased before. And they actually approached us about it. And then through land sales, we've acquired other things. And so as we've purchased more land, we've just put that in our names.
They give their thoughts now on this multi-generation thing as you go on from, Ryan's father and mother to them, and now them on to Liz, the next generation. Here we go.
The written down aspect of my father and my transition has been based largely on assumptions, and maybe by the grace of God, that's all worked out good, that we have a good relationship. I like I said, I believe he's transitioned some land over. I think the sisters are going to be more recipients of cash through various means that he's used to do that, and maybe the land. And we have transitioned over. He's purchased less of the machinery. He does a little bit, but we've kind of transitioned the machinery line over to me. And to be honest, I think Dad just doesn't want a lot of that to go through probate, and he does get to the point, and I'm already to that point. The money doesn't mean as much as it used to. It's not really about the money. We did have a group of, the Beef Council brought some dietitians out, and there was a young lady from Florida, and we had pictures of the kids on the wall, and she had toured the feed yard, and I don't really think any agricultural background, but she came up to June and she says, I get it. She said, this is about the kids. This is about the next generation. It's not really about the money, is it? And I said, yeah, I mean, it's a business, and I don't apologize for running a business, but, I think I'm the 5th generation. My kids would be 6th, and, it is acquiring possessions and land doesn't drive me as much, other than opportunity for the kids. And like I said, like June said, I hope I've never made them feel like they have to come back, but I want the opportunity to be here if they so choose.
Have agreements in writing. That's what they talk about next.
I suppose initially, I think in exchange for use of equipment, Dad probably exchanged that for labor. I think, not a lot was written down in our operation. Probably that's a shortfall, but it seems like that's worked out okay. But I also I have two sisters who are off farm. So, it's been more just communication with Dad and I. I think that would probably be something we could improve as far as expectations from either party, from Dad expecting this or me expecting that. But, for the most part, it's been a smooth transition, and I'm thankful for the opportunity that Dad has given me. Some of that land we bought in the 90s, we had a few good years of cattle and paid it off, and, just slowly as we build equity and our balance sheet looked better, we were able to, acquire land that fits into the operation.
Initially, it was 50-50 with the calves with Ryan and I and his dad having the other 50, and the same with the land. Today, it's 50-50 with our crop side, our agronomy side, and it's 25 Wayne, 75 us with the cattle side. And that just happened with he didn't want as much income, not having as much expenses. We pay all the employees, so it should be written down. That is definitely a downfall. We have failed in that. I will just straight up say there should be contracts at least. Even if it's not once a year, but just saying, what are your expectations? Because it's very easy for me to assume that this is okay with you, or they assume that this is okay with me and it's not, or vice versa. And it's not okay.
It's interesting that they really recognize their shortfall, and I would encourage them to fix that, especially as they have to deal with Ryan's sisters. And not that anything's going bad, but let's prevent that let's prevent situations where they would go bad by having good communications, especially in writing. Here's some more on that thought.
As we've transitioned, as I mentioned, our daughter Liz is back and her husband Braden. We have done a little better job of writing things down, and not that a lot of times I forget. We talked about something a year ago or 2 years ago, and it's like, oh, hey, who was going to buy the fuel, or who was going to own this tractor, or, was this hay on shares or whatever. And some of those things I've been appreciative. Liz seems a little more detail oriented. We'll write things down, and that's been a beneficial thing. Mainly, sometimes I think that oversight, or I don't remember what I said a year ago, could cause hard feelings. And as I transition to the next generation, that can cause a little more anxiety or stress, just making sure it's fair for both sides. You want to give them the opportunity. And I appreciate their new ideas, their different ways of doing things. I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore. And sometimes you can stagnate in your ideas and thoughts, and it's refreshing to see a new viewpoint of, hey, what if we try doing this? And I think we've each taken our roles. Braden, as I mentioned, they started a cow herd. That's been their deal. We help them every now and then, but they've really taken that literally bull by the horns, or not horns as they're Angus, but it's, everybody has their different skill sets and enjoyment. And I think that's important too. If you're doing something that doesn't motivate you or you don't enjoy, I think you're going to burn out and not be that excited about it for long term.
So they also had conversations with the children about coming back, and that's already been mentioned a little bit, but here's a little more on that topic.
I feel like Ryan's done a really good job of actually verbalizing. There is opportunity for you here if you want to come back, to all 4 of the kids. I think that they've always known that, because he's actually said that on multiple occasions to all of the kiddos. If you'd like to come back, there's opportunity for you, but there is no pressure. Our youngest, Court, actually wants to be an aerial applicator. He flies airplanes, and that's his deal. And we enjoy his help while he's here. It's not his passion, and that's great. We are excited to see what he will do with ag communications and flying his airplanes. And Erica is a dietitian. She's obviously, the Beef Council has just taken him on a tour of NREC, and she understands the beef industry, so is able to share with her classmates, hey, yep, this is on track. These are things that she can add to that conversation with her colleagues, and that's exciting for us. And Elizabeth we do a better job, I think, on the veterinary side, writing things down. This is what wages are going to be. This is what your part of the practice is going to be. As far as the feed yard side, she shows up and helps us ride pens until the little one came, and we'll see how that transitions when she feels like it's okay to come back.
So let's meet that next generation. So here's a few words from Braden and Liz. Let's hear what they got to say.
I'm Braden Forker, and this is my wife Liz and my daughter Callie. We started a cow herd just this past year, and then my wife's been doing some vet work, and we also help out my in-laws.
I am a veterinarian, and I graduated from Iowa State about a year ago. I practice mostly food animal medicine with my parents, and then help breed and raise cows, and work when I can at the feed yard.
So it's pretty cool to think that they have a 3 veterinarian practice there, so they can kind of cover for each other, and that these two have managed to rent a sizable enough pasture they can have their own cow herds. That's pretty neat. But let's hear their story about how they never really thought about coming back. I think this is interesting too.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, we never really planned on coming home. Neither of us planned on moving back here. But as we kind of got towards the end of me being in veterinary school and talked about where we were going to go, we started looking at the opportunities that were out there just as far as building our own cow herd, because that's always been a goal of ours. And as we looked into the price of land and the price of equipment and the price of cows, it just didn't really seem feasible to do all of that just starting out in a random place where we didn't have any help. And kind of around the same time, Mom and Dad started to need more help around the operation. My grandpa's getting older, and they're always expanding what they're doing, both on the veterinary side and farming side and feedlot. So they were talking about needing help, and at that time it just kind of made sense that there were some opportunities for grass around here for us, and opportunities for me to step in on the veterinary side of things, and Braden to help out with the feedlot, that things just kind of fell into place for us to come home.
So here's some more ideas about communication and its importance when you're working with a multi-family or a multi-generational business. In this case, it happens to be a farm and feedlot.
We actually met with a couple who has been working with their parents for probably 5 to 10 years. And before Elizabeth and Braden came back, and we took them out for supper, and we just said, what are you doing? What's working? What's not working? And they said we would be a poster child for things that are not working, but they were just kind of being silly. But I just feel like asking questions. This is not reinventing the wheel. Lots of people have done this before, and there's been success stories, obviously, and there's been failures. And so that was really insightful to me, to sit across the table from those guys with little children and just say, you know what, how is this working out for you, and what things have you done that have worked, and what things have you done that's not. And I think a repetitive theme is talk about it, write things down, make sure that there's no assumptions. And when you're away from those people, don't bicker and talk negatively, because I feel like that infiltrates the entire operation. If you have something to say, go to the person and say it to the person. And as hard as that may be, and as poorly received sometimes as that could be, at least it's said, and then you can go on with your day. And a lot of times people get defensive and they say things, and it's inappropriate in the way that they say it, but some of those things still need to be said. And so sometimes I think, listen for what's true and what's said to you, whether it's hollering at you or biting or in whatever way. There's probably some truth in that, and you're probably not right all the time. And so humility is huge. Just listen to what they have to say, encourage them, and when you have opportunity to respond, don't respond in the same way. You can be the bigger person and try to respond in a kind way. I just think all of us are sinful, and we all need grace.
There's some great advice there, quite honestly. Let's hear what the younger generation said about communication.
I think communication is always something that everyone needs to work on. I think when things get really busy, our communication is minimal, but I think it's something that we can all learn from. I don't know. our communication is not always that great.
It's not just one side or the other. We can all communicate a little bit better about what we need or what's expected or what would make things go easier.
Okay, so we need to wind it down because I'm running out of time. But I thought this video on what they thought was important and their advice on that is really cool, and you have to listen to what they had to say about this.
I just finished a degree in counseling, and I feel like my counseling is on a horse every morning riding through black cattle. It wasn't in our marriage vows, but kind of, that we would feed Angus cattle. And honestly, they are my therapy, but possessions don't drive me. And really, if somebody gets the better end of the deal, they get the better end of the deal. I don't think that maybe the more we hold tightly to things, the more it's going to slip out of our hands, whether it's our kids or the things that we have. And I really do feel like we've been given a great opportunity to raise our kids in a place where they can understand how to be good caretakers of the land. People talk a lot about sustainability, and I just don't see a whole lot better sustainability than we want to make that farm ground better than it was the year before, and using lagoon water and the steers here. And teaching that, I think that there's so much more than just the land, hopefully, that we pass down or that's been passed down to us. I mean, just the opportunity to be good caretakers of those things. As far as if you talk about succession, I think that is way more important to me than the operation or the land that we're standing on or the machinery that we have.
Cool thoughts. And remember, Willa Cather even said back in her Senate and My Antonio book, she said, we're only here for a little while. It's our job to make sure that land is available for the next generation. So I think that's a cool way to look at that. Here's some advice for some others that are the younger generation, from the younger generation. Here we go.
I know everybody talks about it, but communication it's the biggest thing. Your parents aren't going to necessarily know what you need to do or want to do when you come back, and you're not going to need to know what they expect either, or you're going to need to know what they expect. Obviously, they have to be successful in order for there to be something for you to come back to. So making sure that they can stay successful while bringing you into the operation as well is a big thing.
Yeah, I think, like you said, just identifying the things that are most important to you and to them are important, and then if it's feasible to add a sector like we've added cows, that can be helpful just as far as profitability, but it obviously also decreases the available help and just causes more things for everyone to do. So you kind of have to balance that out a little bit.
One other thing I guess I would say is when you're in school, everybody in agriculture just wants to do the agronomy or the livestock or the animal science. Branch out a little bit maybe. I know I wish I would have taken more welding classes, some diesel tech, stuff like that. Probably would have helped us out a lot coming back with something like that, rather than just an animal science degree.
Yeah, I agree.
Good advice. And again, we're running out of time. It's some great stuff there. And if you listen to my talk, I talk all the time about making sure we have arrangements in place for both generations. And I think that's what they were kind of alluding to. And I appreciate that very much. Here's some final thoughts from Rand and June.
Like June said, I mean, this is our dream or whatever. If it's not your dream and it's not your passion, don't come back. It's too hard to work, I think. I mean, and I enjoy it. I know my dad always says every job has he always says cleaning out the chicken barn jobs, that aren't so nice. And I tell most people 9.5 days out of 10, I'm happy for what I get to do. But I think I'm pretty fortunate that it's 9 or 9.5, So everybody has those days. Agriculture drives me, I guess. I enjoy being part of the community. When we came back, June mentions that too. We worked for Dr. Lange in town. It was a good opportunity for June to meet a lot of people and maybe gain that rapport. I think, go whether it's soybean growers meeting or the cattlemen's meeting or whatever, be involved in the community for the off-farm spouse to maybe gain acceptance or whatever it is, but just have that rapport in the community.
I think it's important to know your roles. I talked with a succession coach from Canada a couple years ago. She was coming down to do the Women in Ag conference, and she just called me up and said, hey, who's going to be there? What are their needs? And those kinds of things. And she just talked a lot about when she meets with families, she wants to make sure everybody knows what their roles are, and what they maybe would like them to be, and not the roles that they currently have. And that was something that was definitely in my mind assumed from all of us here, because I enjoy riding a horse, being with the steers. I like to run the chute. I give vaccinations. It's not every farm wife's dream. A lot of wives don't want to vaccinate cattle. They, even if they work on the farm, some of them are tentative with that. They do livestock handling, but as far as vaccinations and treatment protocols and those kinds of things, that's not their deal. And I enjoy cooking. I mean, I will bake into the night so we can have food. When Ryan's mom used to bring out lunches, and she's not as able anymore. And so that's enjoyment for me. But for some people, it's a chore. So Jimmy John's is down the road, and you're not a failure as a wife if that's where your lunch comes from. And just understanding that. I also do the books, and that happens into the night as well. But I'm not as gifted in accounting, but it's just something that needs to be done. And so that's what I've done. I think that a lot of times resentment can come from somebody putting you in a role that A, you're not qualified to do, or B, you don't want to do. And understanding what those roles are, in my mind, are huge, and making sure that that is communicated.
There's some really great advice there, and I hope people enjoyed the session. And I've enjoyed going out and doing the interviews, and I wish I could have showed you more. They made a lot of the great comments, but we'll just go with that for now. And I'll be on live in just a second here to answer some questions. Okay. So do you want me to take over, correct, Ryan? If anybody's got any questions, you could jump in right now.
Yeah, go right ahead, Allan. Again, if you do have questions or comments, we invite you to put those in the chat or the Q&A box. I see in the Q&A there's one question here already. Looks like you answered, Allan. People were just wondering about those lease forms, the fillable lease forms. There are some links on our website, aglease101.org, if you want to talk about that.
And I didn't, I gave the website's up. I did not answer the part about how to put in first right of refusals. But that's probably something that you probably should get done with a lawyer, because I've been told by the university not to give legal advice. It'd be better if I didn't do that. So please, if you have anything that you'd like to do like that, that's important, and that can be done. But just work with a lawyer to get that specific line added to that lease about the first right of refusal stuff. So that'd be good. That's good. Is there a template to ask a couple to take on what? I'm not understanding. Is there a template to ask a couple to take on their place? Trevor, what do you, I'm not sure I follow that. But they'll say, so if let's say that I'm going to go work with another couple, okay? That's, to me, in my mind, what that means then is that I think that, the thing we have to do is we have to get, I'm trying to get this going. Here we go. I think the thing we have to do is we have to understand that when you succeed into a farming operation or take over a farming operation, it's just some steps you have to go through. One step I talk about all the time is the whole idea of testing first. Let's make sure that the younger generation can do all the tasks, and they're willing to do all the tasks. The thing that June just got done talking about not getting into a position that you don't like. You got to love it if you're going to farm. If you're going to be on a ranch, you got to love that. And if you're not qualified or don't love it, then maybe that doesn't work. So I think that's one part. The testing part's one part. The second part is, if a mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma just put you on the farm and don't ever give you anything to be in charge of, the management part, then you're not likely to stay very long as a manual laborer. So mom and dad have to understand that they have to share their management over a period of time. And then the third part will be, as you establish yourself and get into that operation, how are you going to take over some of the enterprises, meaning how are you going to take over the livestock, how are you going to take over the machinery, and how's that going to get assigned? You heard Ryan talk about his dad assigning him the machinery. You heard David talk about how he bought the machinery from his dad, given the trade-in price. Those kind of things have to be worked out. And then the fourth part will be the actual land transfer. And land transfer usually occurs at the owner's passing, and then it gets transferred, so you get the increase in basis. And that's kind of a really quick way that I think about how that's going to work out. And I don't know if you say any more here. Okay, how do you manage a situation where there's a small mid-sized farm and not quite sure if it's enough room support? Okay, Trevor said thank you. Good. Thank you, Trevor. If there's enough room to support on the farm to support the both son and the family's parents. Okay, so that is interesting. Go talk to an ag banker or go see a financial advisor on that. Make sure that you have that coverage. You have to have enough resources there for both families to make it, or don't even start that deal. I think that without livestock, we're talking about 15 days, 1,700 acres per family to support a family, maybe 1,800 acres, something like that. And that's more eastern Nebraska than western Nebraska. But without livestock, I think we're talking about that. With livestock, that number of acres can drop back because you're going to rely on the livestock for some of the income. So that's just kind of a really rough guideline. I think, I don't know what farm credit's saying right now. I know Bob Campbell's on or was on, but that would be something that they'll run by somebody like an ag advisor from Farm Credit and find out what they think that should be.
Okay, just a reminder, we have a couple minutes left, maybe time for one or two more questions. If you have them, please do type them in the Q&A panel or in the chat. For waiting for that, Allan, I guess, are the stories that we heard today that they shared, are these fairly typical of the experience that you see in your work from people across the state? I know each is in a unique situation. Everybody's situation is unique, but just wondering what stuck out to you. Oh, I think you're on mute there, Allan.
Okay, there we go. Now I'll try it. So I think the two things now did help with that, did help show that very nicely what the two paths are for the future of agriculture. And I think that's important, and I think it's okay. I think it's good. Ryan, can you see me, or did I take myself off the camera? You can see me? Good. That's the main thing. I screwed up my screen. I'm not going to try and touch it now. I'm going to let that go. But yeah, anyway, so these are these were nice, clean stories, meaning that David decided to just end his operation and have the sale and all those kind of things. Ryan and June are transferring from Ryan's dad to him, right? Wayne goes to Ryan. Now Ryan's going to go on to the kids that are going to stay on the farm, onto that next generation. And you saw the next generation was in the arms, right? The babies grew up and running. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But that sort of thing happens too, and that's been very common. Especially, my tenure in Platte County shows that was a very common thing for the folks up there to do, especially the ones that had the small feeding operations or the small to mid-sized feeding operations in addition to their farming operations. Pretty typical.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Allan.
I don't have that chat screen available, so I don't know. Yeah, go ahead and finish it up. It's almost 1 o'clock. We'll let people go.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks everybody for your questions, for attending today. We especially want to thank David and Ryan and June and Braden and Liz for doing this with us. It's had some great video we captured with them. So thank you to them. Of course,
Ryan, one more thing for me.
Oh, yep.
Ryan, can I jump in with one more thing?
Yeah,
I want to say to the group that, man, do I ever appreciate Ryan going out, setting up 2 cameras to have the interesting video. And Ryan's doing a great job here in Ag Economics Extension to be our communications person, and he's fantastic. And so thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Allan. We appreciate everything you do as well. We did have one last question come in here. If you want to take a stab at this, just to clarify, you said how many acres to support a family and how many cows to support a family?
Oh, I don't know about the cow side. I think if you're going without cattle, you're probably looking at 1,500 acres plus, 1,500 acres or a little bit more, depending on where you are in the state and how productive the acres are. If it's irrigated or dry land or, all those kind of things. I think we have to consider that too. I don't know. There's no set deal. I think probably my best answer there was not to try and name the number of acres. My best answer there was to get people to understand that they better go work with their ag bank or financial advisor and have to know their numbers well, to know where they're at with how that was going to work. If you follow where I'm going with that, I think that's the important part of that whole deal.
Yeah, great. And
You have to work with your financial professionals to figure that out. If you want to have a conversation with somebody for free and you don't want to trust your local people, consider calling the Rural Response Hotline, 1-800-464-0258, and ask to talk to Dave Gaylor. He's a financial guy that's kind of had this position before I did. And the Rural Response Hotline, you get you hooked up with somebody that could talk to you about your numbers and maybe attend one of their clinics and talk to Joe and Dave, and you get some more information that way. I think that would be what I'd recommend.
yeah, thanks, Alan. We had one more comment, just somebody saying it's very helpful to hear the side of the younger generation because the transition period is something that this person had not given consideration to. So yeah, that's what we were hoping for with videos like this. And we encourage everybody here to check out our website at cap.unl.edu. You see it on the screen here at the bottom. Alan has a number of great resources for succession and transition estate planning that you can find there. And the recording of today's webinar will also be available there within the next 24 hours, we expect. If you check the chat box too, we would love to have your feedback in a very short evaluation of this webinar. And you can also provide your input on ideas for future webinars. So we're always looking to meet the needs of folks here in Nebraska to try to be as helpful as we can here at UNL and with the Center for Ag Profitability. So with that, I'm seeing no more questions. We're at 1 o'clock. So Alan, thank you again. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks to you also, Ryan. Have a great day, everybody.